Microsoft and AidData is going to begin with a video message by Brad Smith, the Vice Chair and President of Microsoft. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Smith, Vice Chair and President at Microsoft, and I'm just delighted to be with you. I think this is such a terrific program. I first want to say thank you to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and to the President of William & Mary, Catherine Rowe, for bringing all of this and all of us together. I thought I would share just 3 thoughts with you for a few minutes today. The first is this. I think that you're part of this conversation because this is one of the most important conversations, really one of the most important causes in the world today. It's about the preservation and promotion of our fundamental democratic values. The right of people to come together and choose their leaders in a free election. The right of people to express their views, to pursue their creativity. This, in my view, is one of the world's great timeless values. But it can only remain timeless if each new generation makes it its own. I had the opportunity when I was a college student, a law student, and early in my career to do just that, in part by participating in programs just like this. It gave me the opportunity to meet other people, to think about what these principles meant to me, and to find my own opportunities to pursue them. And that's what I did. And it's just given me such a fundamental opportunity to think more broadly, and I hope it will do the same thing for you. The second thing I'd like to share is this. The opportunities to make this part of your life and your career are so varied in the world today, and that's a wonderful thing. Certainly when I was a university student, I was probably most focused on pursuing a career in government. And there are so many extraordinary careers in government. And I feel every day so thankful for the people who dedicate their careers to the public sector. But I've also learned this. You don't actually need to work for the public sector in order to engage in public service. And I think that is something that broadens the opportunity for all of you to contribute as you look to your own future. For me, early in my career as a lawyer, part of what I did was take on pro bono legal activity. And I got involved in civic organizations. And those really shaped what I then was able to bring when I joined Microsoft 30 years ago this year, and what I've really strived throughout my career at Microsoft, frankly, to create opportunities for other people to do. So find your passion, find the interests that are important to you, and then think about how you can weave them into your career and your life in a variety of ways, and not one way alone. Trust me, those opportunities are ahead of you. And then the last thing I'd like to talk about is probably what you'd expect from somebody at Microsoft, the role of technology. Democracy finds its roots in ancient Greece, but its future is intertwined with the role of technology. Technology that helps and technology that frankly also creates challenges for the vitality of democracy. And AI will transform this yet again. Every day here at Microsoft, we do focus hard on how to use technology to protect the democratic nations of the world, often increasingly working ever more closely with NATO as but one critical example. The war in Ukraine has forced us to confront these challenges in a bigger way than we were doing even before. But I view our role fundamentally as providing the digital infrastructure that protects the democracies of the world from both foreign influence and cybersecurity operations and preserves the infrastructure needed for elections to go forward securely, for people to share opinions with each other, for us to protect against fake content, or at times the use of the internet for, say, acts of extreme or terrorist violence. What this shows, even more, is that we all have an opportunity and a need to work together, to bring together so many disciplines, so many ways of thinking, so many ways to get things done. And I know this is fundamentally about your future around the world. This event brings people together. You all have the opportunity to contribute your ideas and share them with others. There's an online platform. Share your ideas. You will make all of us better. Thank you for what you have the opportunity to do. I look forward to seeing you put your ideas into action.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this panel, this conversation on leveraging data to strengthen democracy and security. We don't have to convince you that data is important. Tim, let's begin with you. You had a seat at the table in developing a response to COVID-19. Can you walk us through the role of data in responding to a crisis like that, and also what it takes to do that successfully?
Sure. And just to provide a little bit of context for what my role is at Microsoft, so I'm the weather and climate portfolio lead within Azure Engineering, which means, and if you heard Brad's comments, what I get to do is what he mentioned at the end. I get to take the technology that we've got in order to enable predictive modeling and data analytics and get that to you all. Get those technologies into the hands of not just the people in this room, but to the hands of anybody in any corner of the earth that has a better idea and an opportunity to act on it. And so what we saw during COVID was this very compressed time frame where people understood the value of that. So if you think about what happened when the early indications came out that we had a problem, there was data coming in from multiple sources that people were trying to parse through. And there were predictive models being built of what would happen were this virus to be abated, unabated, those other pieces. And so we worked very aggressively and actively to be able to pull that data together and be able to process it in a time frame that we could get near real-time output from it in order to formulate responses. But what COVID really presented to us as a planet was this notion that it wasn't just anymore about science to science talking each other. What we needed to do is we needed to take those outputs and we needed to get them into the hands of the policymakers so that they could make literally near real-time decisions about how we would allocate resources, remediate those other pieces. And so it was really the first time in the 20 years that I'd been doing this that we had this notion where there was an equal imperative to not only get the answer faster, but to be able to get it into the hands of the policy community and individual citizens so that they could understand just the gravity of the situation that we were in.
Yeah, and speaking to that, once you get data into the hands of ordinary citizens, to everybody, I think there are also times when that doesn't go as planned or it doesn't go quite as well as we hope it would. Dave, and then Rachel after that, do you want to speak to some of the threats presented by data to democracy and security?
Absolutely, thanks for the question. And again, for context, I am in our Democracy Forward team. So we literally are tasked with safeguarding democracy for Microsoft. And I cover elections and civic engagement for the team. Look, with data in the hands of so many people and at such volume and scale today, I think information integrity is probably the defining issue of our society today, whether that's good or bad. That's what we're all dealing with in this room, and as young professionals, I think it's a difficult time to be coming up in the professional space right now. You've got so much, but Brad likes to say, all emerging technologies can be used as a tool or a weapon, right? And there's so much potential for emerging technologies here. They can cause harm to society, right? I think we see the impacts of especially foreign malign propaganda on every aspect of our lives at this point. And in dealing with elections, I see it everywhere around the world. But you have an opportunity here. We talk about the advent of AI and what's going to happen. Are we in a Terminator movie? Maybe, but we're also at the cusp of something big. The ability, it'll be not who has the better AI, but who is able to use AI better, right? How are you all going to use AI to pick out insights, to do your jobs better, to sift through those mountains of data and pick out insights that genuinely help, advance democracy, advance your missions? That's what the immediate future is going to be about here. And it's a weird time, but it's also an exciting time. There's a lot of potential there.
I'd love to build on that.
Yeah.
We have, coupled with an amazing increasing body of information, not only we have threats posed by that information to democracy and security, but we're able to leverage that information to a greater degree than we ever have before to solve security challenges. I'm thinking in particular of how much of a cybersecurity advantage we've gained because of all the information that we're able to parse through. So there are some absolutely serious benefits of the amount and volume of information that we can process today. At the same time, we have an incredibly contested information space. We have a contested information space in the military domain, in the public sphere, in social media conversations. And when you bring in emerging technologies into this mix, we're not creating necessarily new problems. We're exacerbating and accelerating existing problems. And so one of the fundamental points and problems I think that we need to address in that point of acceleration is how we're addressing that contested information space, how we are creating, for example, new validation mechanisms for the public to verify and identify the data that they're seeing and where it's coming from, who's producing it. And I think we really need to quickly, as an international community, come together to create standards that the public can recognize in order to do that.
Yeah, and that's important because once we start losing trust in our data, we start losing trust in our democratic institutions, then we have a problem that's difficult to back ourselves out of. Rachel, maybe we'll start with you, and then Dave, Tim, have you join in too. So how do you think we build resilience to that manipulation? How do we actually hold someone responsible, and who is responsible for information online?
It's a great question. I think we need a recognizable, standardized way, as I had mentioned, to validate and verify data. One practice that is increasingly developing, Microsoft is participating in this. Other tech companies around the world are participating in standardization as well, especially for content provenance. That's one point that I really would like to emphasize. When we have synthetic data production, and I don't want to use the word manipulated data or generated data, I really would like to focus on the term synthetic data because it is not all bad information. We're going to have a mix of valid, we're going to have a mix of invalid data and information. And so being able to identify that information through traceable methods that are easily accessible to both the public and social media platforms, we can actually start to modify and create a content ecosystem where we can more easily identify information that has been mass-produced, altered in some way, perhaps by AI. And I think that once we have that content provenance ecosystem together, it will be, we will have an information environment that is much more easily parsable and more recognizable as to what is valid and what is not.
I think, especially in today's society, a lot of this comes down to teaching people how to interpret data, right? I mean, again, mountains of data coming at you, lots of information, a lot of it false. We usually talk about two things: media literacy and civics education, right? We need to be training kids in school on how to interpret the things that are coming at them, especially in social media, in a responsible way, in a contextualized way, in a way that helps them, pick things apart and what is, not necessarily what is true and what is not, but how do you trust a source? What is a source? What are good journalistic practices? Things like that. And the other thing we talk about is civics education. I mean, if any of you work with CSIS, they have a program called Civics at Work that it's predicated on the fact that civics education is a national security imperative in the US now. We saw what happens. I mean, we had a public demonstration of what happens when people who don't understand how their government works respond to losing an election. They do stupid stuff like storm the Capitol. That's becomes a national security problem when they, maybe take it to the next level. So getting to people and helping them understand how the government works, but also encouraging them to take an active role and gain a stake in their own society. Promoting not just civics education, but civic involvement. Go to your school board meetings, take part in your neighborhood associations, right? These are the things that we've kind of lost in the last 15 years with the advent of social media. And those are the things that connect you to your community. They're the things that help you not respond in a way. They help you contextualize the things that are going on. And so I think both of those things are absolutely critical.
I have a slightly different perspective because of my background, where I've for most of my career, I've had the ability to focus on the infrastructure behind what was driving. But I'm also, at the same time, I'm still trying to recover from Nadia Nadim this morning saying, "I belong to the earth." That was one of the most powerful statements I've heard in a long time, especially from someone with her background. And in terms of weather and climate and what we do, we have an opportunity not just within the field of weather and climate, but we also have data that in a certain respect, it just is. Geospatial data and sensor data about weather, about wind, humidity, temperature, this is data that's irrefutable, right? And we have the ability to collect this. It also does not know geopolitical boundaries. It is just data. So we in this space not only have an opportunity to tackle some existential challenges facing every citizen on the planet in terms of how climate is going to impact them and generations going forward, but we also have the opportunity to lead the way in the technology space of saying, okay, we've started with a data set that everyone agrees is a valid data set. How can we set up a chain of custody, if you will, so that by the time this gets to an output, it remains trusted data? And some of that is a physical and a technical process that I'm happy to engage on the democracy side to help where we can in their efforts in the same way that they help what we do.
I think that's a great point to throw it open to questions in the room or online. Do we have any questions?
Divya, can I just real quick while
please.
people are lining up? I'd love to just say one more thing, just to put it in your heads. We're at the cusp of something big here, right? We're at the cusp of a real data revolution. And you all in the room owe it to yourselves to take ownership of that and make sure that the next iteration of this information environment, this data environment, is inclusive, that all voices are heard. That's the bedrock of democracy, right? So I'd put it to all of you to say, make sure you're part of that solution. Make sure you're including all voices in these solutions.
I think we have a line. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this great panel. I'm a information systems PhD student in Germany, and I feel like, while I totally agree with everything you said, that back home, when we're talking about security capabilities, all we're talking about is hardware. We're kind of like counting tanks and ammunition and so on. But when it comes to cyber in general, we're fully reliant on the US, and I don't think that that's a good thing for any one of us. How can we as European NATO partners catch up to emerging technologies?
Great question. I think one critical piece of technology in this equation is definitely going to be AI. I think that's a pretty indisputable piece of information. Microsoft processes per day more than 60 trillion security signals from around the globe that we get. And that is an inhumanly large number of data points for any single person to process. So in order to shift security balances and imbalances, we are going to have to learn and act on employing technology to aid us in that process. And we are going to have to increase our information sharing as between allies and in between industry and also the public sector to facilitate that. And it's going to have to be, I think, a critical investment as well in skills, because at the same time, while we have these technologies, we need to also be able to, again, validate and verify the information that we're seeing. So I think it's going to be a blend of we still need to partner. We still need to partner to facilitate this. Technology is going to give us a critical information security advantage, and then we also need to recognize that skills, while we will be able to automate some of these tasks, are going to be incredibly important moving forward.
Thank you. We have a request for people waiting to ask questions, which is, would you be able to group questions, also state them as briefly as possible, please, in the interest of allowing as many people as possible to ask them. While we're doing that, we have one question from online. I think, Tim, maybe one is for you. Could you speak to your experience communicating data to policymakers, so not necessarily data people, and how do you do that well?
That's a very good question in terms of how does one do that well, because there's a balance that needs to be walked between and especially it is as important about how do you bridge the science community and the non-science community, where the science community, we traditionally want to ensure that we're conveying as much information as is possible so that everyone else in the room knows that we've thought of all options. But that's not always the best way to communicate to folks that are not of the same ilk, or if that's not the purpose. And so there is this process in how do you communicate data, scientific data, meaningful, impactful scientific data to a policymaking community. It's incredibly important that you have people in the room who are grounded in both the technology and in the community and in the communication of it and in the approach, meaning multiple disciplinary approaches, philosophy, all of the things that a liberal arts education brings to bear, so that the most important thing about the how is the who. Who do you have in the room formulating the bridge between the technology and the policymakers?
Thank you. Let's take another question.
Hi, everybody. I have a question to you from ChatGPT. Might be familiar and friendly. And it reads as follows. Hello, I'm a language model developed by OpenAI known as ChatGPT. I'm being represented today by my human liaison, collectively exploring critical perspectives surrounding data use in AI. Some critics have voiced concern about potential biases embedded in the digital information that notably AI systems are trained on, and this data and search algorithms that determine the information that gains preeminence. They caution that these factors could inadvertently influence social perceptions and potentially even democratic processes. Given your combined expertise in AI ethics, modeling, and civil responsibility, how do you envision we address these concerns? Specifically, what steps should we take to ensure these influential technologies serves to strengthen rather than inadvertently skew our democracy?
All right, I have a human question also to add along with that, I think connected. What are tech companies and governments doing to address information gaps on emerging events, on topics around misinformation? So, thank you.
Well, I'd get back to what I said before, right? I'd actually turn it around and say, to date, most information systems, the way you process information as people living in society, has been horribly skewed. It's been skewed towards men. It's been skewed towards white people. It's been skewed towards straight people. These are true things. We know this. Like, you all especially can appreciate this, geopolitical folks. We have an opportunity here to right those wrongs of the past, right? We have an opportunity here to actually include more perspectives and make sure that all voices are included in the data sets. And I don't want to get too preachy, but I don't know, Rachel, do you want to?
Sure, I'll add on to that. I think it has to be on both sides of the system. It has to be an imperative of the technology provider as much as it has to be in an information environment, in an external ecosystem that is something that we can validate and verify. So an example of this in particular with ChatGPT, we know, and it's publicly disclosed that there is, for example, an end date to the training data of ChatGPT. It does not know about the world, and the reason why I bring it up is because it's important to understand that technology is not given context. Technology does not have a sense of truth or fiction or good or bad or right or wrong. In fact, it's in AI trying to give the most optimal answer to something. At times, the information that it presents will, for example, not be rooted or grounded in information that it was given or that it was trained on. And the reason why that happens is because of the way that the technology works. It's not because that AI is trying to mislead or deceive. And so understanding that technology is not given context, we as technology providers have an incredible imperative to make this information known when we provide tools like this, to provide sources of grounding. For example, when we give results in search or in chat tools like ChatGPT, providing resources and sourcing and citations of that information. And then on the other side, being able to actually track synthetic media when it is generated and understanding what has been authored or photographed by a person versus what has been produced by an AI model. So on one side, it is the responsibility of the technology provider, and then on the other side, technology providers and the public sector can come together to enhance the standards by which we distribute and disseminate information.
Thank you.
Thank
Let's
you.
get a couple more questions asked together, and then I encourage the rest of you, I'm sorry, I realize there are a lot of questions in the room, but please approach the panel at the start of lunch and bombard them with all your questions. Please go ahead.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for speaking to us today. My name is Nash English, and I'm a rising junior at William & Mary. I apologize up front. I had to rope in a lot of different topics in this question, so bear with me. So kind of overall, a lot of the questions were talking about kind of regulation and ethics with AI. And so I guess the question is sort of, is government regulation like good, or do you think it's not very effective at handling like the worst aspects of AI? Because as you said, AI is a very helpful tool in society, but it also has a lot of aspects that can create a lot of polarization in society. And I guess like how do you think that factors into your work? So for example, Section 230 has been getting a lot of attention, and like how monitoring the worst aspects of AI, how that factors into freedom of speech, and I guess how Microsoft deals with that kind of like tension of allowing the public to have AI to use it to their benefit, but then also ensuring that it doesn't tear us apart.
Easy one. Who wants to take it?
I can take.
You should. You're the regulation person.
So, not too long ago, Microsoft actually published a regulatory blueprint for AI, and this is coming off of the work that we have done over the past couple of years, working with regulators in the EU on the draft EU AI Act. We believe that regulation is necessary in order to get this technology to work in a good way for society. One of the reasons being that governments are the ones holding public interest, and it's very important that if we want to couple technology with public interest, that we actually have the right stakeholder in the room to achieve that. So we absolutely are supportive of AI regulation, and in that blueprint, we look at the entire ecosystem all the way through from infrastructure providers and securing cloud infrastructure all the way through to not only the providers of AI models, but also those who are building AI applications on top of those. And so it's really this entire stack that we look at when we look at successful, or what we see as a successful picture of AI regulation that has to touch all of these pieces in order to achieve that end. And so at the end of the day, when we are developing and releasing AI products on our own, one of the things that we've done to address various questions and tensions that Microsoft grapples with in the process of releasing this technology is we have actually made the standards by which we build AI completely public. So our responsible AI standard, our engineering requirements that every single team building an AI system at Microsoft must follow, that is entirely publicly available information. We also, all of the tools that we use, our engineers use to test and validate against our responsible AI standard are open source as well. So we haven't kind of kept it close to the vest to say, this is how we're doing this, we don't know if we're doing it right. We've actually published that information to invite criticism, to invite dialogue on what we're doing and how we can improve it.
All right, just to close us out here, 10 seconds each. What is one thing you want to leave with all of these young leaders as they go away today? So Rachel, I'll start with you, Dave, and then Tim to close.
use the technology. I think it's important if you want to govern it, make policy for it, is to use it.
Dave?
First of all, tribe pride. But also, we all went to William & Mary, in case that wasn't stated. Be open to new opportunities and use that liberal arts education you've got, right? Like, don't be afraid to fail and fail fast in your life and go on to the next thing and use that knowledge that you built, like, to take advantage of new opportunities.
And I'm changing my answer that I thought I was going to give after listening to that last response that we gave, is that I've sat in many of these conversations about, can we legislate good ethical use of AI? Can we build technology and then ensure it's good youth? The answer is maybe, probably, whatever, but ultimately the thing that controls that is you, right? And that it's us. It's us within Microsoft. It's at some point in your career, you're going to be faced with that point where you can either do the right thing or nothing. Do the right thing. Do the right thing.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here.